If you recall, a couple of updates ago, Bungie decided it'd be a good idea to nerf the throwing hammer to where you can't spam it anymore. It would essentially have a 1-second cooldown before you could throw it again, essentially making the once revered Bonk Titan absolutely useless. But with the Edge of Fate, they decided to revert that change to the throwing hammer. And with the stat changes being able to go over 104 more damage, the Bonk Hammer Titan is better than ever. Now, there are 2 exotic gauntlets you can use for this. Number 1 being Wormgod Caress, which I highly recommend. The second one, which is kind of the runner-up, is Synthoceps. With Wormgod's perk Burning Fist, defeating a target with a melee or a finisher grants escalating melee damage, which decays over time. Higher levels of Burning Fist grant increased weapon damage. And with Synthos perk Biotic Enhancements, when you're surrounded, you get that increased melee and super damage, as well as improved weapon handling and reload speed. Both of those exotics capabilities actually stack with the solar aspect Roaring Flame, so final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities, stacking up to 3 times. This means for an exotic like Wormgod Caress, every time you get a melee kill, it will stack Roaring Flames and Burning Fist side by side. Also, being able to have that extra weapon damage is nice, but once you have max stacks of Burning Fist and Roaring Flames, you can one-tap a lot of yellow bar enemies. Even with Synthos, all you need to do is be surrounded to have that Biotic Enhancements proc, as you can see in the bottom left. It's pretty easy to achieve as long as there's a lot of enemies, and once you have Roaring Flames times 3, it still does a lot of damage. Now, to go over everything else I'm using under the Sunbreaker subclass, for the super, I like Hammer of Soul, but you can definitely use Burning Maul if you'd like. For your abilities, Rally or Towering Barricade, it doesn't really matter which one. I just like Rally for me and my team. Next, for movement, I like Strafe. I know a lot of people like Catapult, but you can use what you like. For the melee, obviously, we're gonna need the Throwing Hammer. You throw it out, as long as you're near it, it automatically gets picked back up, and you get Cure from it as well, which is nice. And then for the grenade, you can honestly use what you like. I know a lot of people do the Healing Grenade for tougher encounters for survivability, but I like Thermite overall. The other important aspect I'm using is Soul Invictus. So the solar ability final blows, Hammer of Soul impacts, and defeated scorched targets will create sunspots. Your abilities regenerate faster, and your super drains more slowly while you're standing in it, and sunspots apply scorch and deal damage to targets inside. Entering a sunspot applies restoration. This is the big thing. Again, restoration is the healing over time on the solar subclass. That leads into our fragments. First up, Ember of Empyrean. Solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you. It is a -10 to health, and again, we can talk about multiple ways to get radiant under the fragments and also the artifact, which is really nice. But essentially, once we get restoration from the sunspot and radiant from whatever source we decide to get it from, as long as you continue getting solar weapon or ability final blows, you can have that stay up indefinitely. And then that leads into Ember of Solace, which pretty much increases the duration for radiant and restoration. Next, I do Ember of Ashes. You apply more scorch stacks to targets. Again, more scorch stacks means more chances for an ignition, and ignitions do count toward Roaring Flames, which is nice. But again, I pretty much walk this one for any type of DPS loadout that I'm using. And then for the last column, we do have a couple of options. Ember of Eruption is decent, so your solar ignitions have increased area of effect, but the main thing here is the +10 to melee. I do like that. Another one that's +10 to melee is Ember of Combustion. So final blows with a solar super causes targets to ignite and creates a fire sprite. And again, picking up fire sprites actually gives you grenade energy. Another option would be Ember of Torches. So power melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. It is a -10 to grenade, but the main appeal of this is that all you have to do is melee target and you automatically become radiant. But the reason I'm not rocking this is because of an artifact perk, which I will talk about here in a sec. Honestly, the most important two are Empyrean and Solus, so if you like using something different for these last two, definitely let me know in the comments. Going over the artifacts, in call number 1, we just have the weapon champion mods. Again, use what you like. In call number 2, the most important one is Flame, Fiber, and Free, so we get the Solar Strand and Solar Stasis dual siphon mods for the helmet. And then for your next one, you can honestly rock whatever you like. The only reason I put on one with Frost is, well, you have Frost Armor, Stasis weapons gain increased reload speed and stability, Stasis swords gain increased guard resistance, and the way we can get Frost Armor on the solar subclass is with Fever and Chill. This is also how we're going to get Radiant, so those rapid precision hits with solar weapons grant Radiant, and the same thing with Stasis, that will grant you Frost Armor. What this doesn't tell you is that it actually applies from rapid final blows as well, so being able to get rapid solar weapon final blows to get Radiant that easily, and then being able to keep it up with Ember of Empyrean is a very easy cycle to have. The other one I chose in column 3 is Refresh Thread. So picking up an element to pick up, matching your subclass element or a tangle if you're on strand, grants energy to your least charged ability, which is decent. In call number 4, to match refresh threads, I just put on Elemental Coalescence, so defeating targets has a chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element. In this case, it would be a Fire Sprite. I do like Elemental Days, especially for the more endgame activities where I have to deal with champions, so stunning a champion with an elemental weapon creates an elementally aligned explosion, applying a matching elemental debuff to them and targets nearby. This one is super underrated. You can pretty much like half health a champion just by stunning them, and then being able to clean them up with pretty much the one-tap melee on Titan is quite diabolical. After that, I just put on Cauterized Darkness, so Stasis and Strand debuff non-boss combatants take increased solar damage from all sources. Again, this can be good for a variety of targets, especially if you're doing harder activities. In the final column, I put on Radiant Shrapnel. Dealing sustained weapon damage while radiant or defeating a Scorch combatant with a weapon causes the target to release solar projectiles that deal damage and Scorch on impact. And since it's going to be very easy to become Radiant with this build, we might as well have the extra Scorch stacks around. Maybe that will also proc some extra ignitions. And the last one I chose is Elemental Overdrive. Picking up an elemental pickup or tangle grants increased damage to weapons of the same element. More than likely, it's going to be Fire Sprites, which means our solar weapons get bonus damage. I know some people would want to do Shield Crush. The issue here is that you have to have consistent Woven Mail Frost Armor or a Void Overshield to have the faster melee recharge and additional damage, which is tough on the solar subclass in general, but you could say, you know, the Amplified and Radiant portion, having your grenade recharge faster and deal increased damage, is also a pretty good option here too. Maybe if you're with a team that provides the Woven Mail Frost Armor or Void Overshield, this will be a lot more viable, but doing solo, I would just recommend putting on Elemental Overdrive. For your weapon options, the cool thing here is that you're not really tied down to any specific weapon type, although I do recommend having some sort of solar weapon in your arsenal overall. And take note that the 1-2 punch perk on shotguns and the new spread shot hand cannons do work with the throwing hammer. So as a test, I'll throw my hammer at this boss. It's 375. If I proc 1-2 punch with a hand cannon and then throw my hammer, it does 655. And if I use a regular 1-2 punch shotgun, the damage goes up to 936. Even though it's not necessary, having a 1-2 punch shotgun can yield you almost a ×3 melee damage boost. In the kinetic slot, you can honestly use what you like. I like Mint Retrograde, especially for those anti-barrier champions. Festival Flight for crowd control is nice. Even a 1-2 punch shotgun here is good, but if you have a stasis special weapon, the cool thing here is that you can achieve that frost armor on the solar subclass. And one exotic I would look into if you have it is Aegir Scepter. Being able to kill one target and freeze everything else around it is super nice and allows for very easy multi-kills and stacks of frost armor. As you can see, just by killing these guys, I can get frost armor up to ×4. In the energy slot, like I said, having a solar weapon is nice. If you have a good roll in the Yeartide Apex, this thing is fantastic. I have Heal Clip and Chaos Reshaped. I have another one in the vault that's pretty good as well, but having this SMG is good for a lot of stuff. But like I said, any solar weapon would technically work here. You know, you have a decent roll in the Ahab Char, the Return Memory, you know, Rocket Pistol from Crucible, same thing, the new Stars and Shadows Solar, that's nice as well. Even an exotic like Devil's Ruin would technically work here as well, and also be able to stop unstoppable champions and cause ignitions by itself. That's pretty nice. And for your heavy weapon, use what you like. It honestly doesn't matter. If you're doing DPS, again, the only thing I note is to make sure it matches up with the weapon surge mods that you're using. With the Edge of Fate, our stats got a complete rework, and the main ones I'd focus on would be number 1, melee, and secondly, weapons. Everything else after that isn't absolutely necessary. The main reason for melee isn't necessarily the ability cooldown and melee energy we get from other sources. Since the throwing hammer can be picked back up, we don't really need the regen from it. It's the extra damage by going over the 100 stat. And for the weapon stat, you at least want to get up to 100 so you can have the max reload handling and damage percentage. Going over it will allow you to have the chance to get additional rounds for your weapons and also deal more damage to bosses and opposing guardians. But the main thing here is just having at least 100 so you get the max percentage bonuses. After that, you could look into the grenade and super stat. You don't really have to do class ability for this. And for health, you don't really need it, considering you get health back from not only your melee, but also restoration built into the solar subclass. So you don't necessarily need health. How we get these stats is dependent upon armor archetypes, which was added in the Edge of Fate. And if we go under our ghost in the third column, you can actually see all 6 archetypes here. So which ones should we try to get for this build? You should at least try to get one brawler one, so you have the primary stat in melee, which means you're going to get a lot of it. And then the secondary one is going to be health, unfortunately, which we don't necessarily need, but having the melee one is going to be good. Even then, having one Paragon mod is going to be decent. Even though super is the primary stat, you do get melee as the secondary, which isn't bad. And your only other option is gunner, really. So you have the primary stat into weapon, so you can at least get to that 100. And then grenade as the secondary isn't necessarily bad, but again, there really is no other, armor archetype combo here that really benefits this build outside of those three. For my armor mods, starting with the helmet, I do like the Solar Stasis Dual Siphon mod if I'm going to be using those two weapons. So if I get rapid final blows with either of them, it will create an orb of power. Again, I do sub in, the Solar Strand Dual Siphon if I'm using strand weapons with solar, and sometimes I'll just put on Harmonic Siphon just for the solar weapons because the cost is so low, which is nice. Next, hands-on, gain bonus super energy on melee kills. We're going to be doing a lot of meleeing, might as well get some super energy out of it. And then lastly, I just put on Powerful Friends if I'm with a team, but if you can put on 2 hands-on, that's going to be pretty good. On my gauntlets, I'm using heavy-handed, so my power melee final blows will give me orbs of power, and then I'm using dual melee font mods. When you pick up an orb of power, it's going to give you an armor charge, and with any of these blue mods, it will last 10 seconds, and as long as I have that armor charge, I get a bonus to my melee stat with these melee font mods. Having 1 gives you a plus 20, having 2 gives you plus 40, and having 3 gives you plus 50. So by having 2 melee font mods, it brings my 109 melee stat up to 149, which means if you have at least a 160 melee stat and you have 2 font mods, that will max out your melee stat to 200, giving you the max bonus damage for your melee. On my chest piece, I'm just using Stasis Ammo Generation for Egger Scepter, but again, you can honestly use whichever one that you like depending on what weapons you're using. Again, just make sure to mash it up. Same thing with the resistance mods. Again, since I'm going to be melee range, I do like melee damage resist, but again, it depends on what activity you're doing, so just mash it up with the resistance mods that you'd like. On my boots, if I'm doing harder activities, I do like having recuperation, so when I pick up an orb of power, it does give me health back, which is nice on top of all the other healing that I get. The only reason I'm using the weapon font mod for the plus 20 is to help boost my weapon stat. You don't necessarily need to use that. The only other thing that you need to focus on is the specific weapon surge mods. In my case, I'm using Solar Weapon Surge. Again, as long as I have an armor charge, I get bonus damage with this specific type. Now, like I said before, depending on what weapons you're using, again, just make sure to match it up, especially if you're using a weapon for boss DPS, make sure it matches that damage type. And lastly, on my class item, I like Time Dilation. So it takes my 10-second armor charge time up to 15 seconds. So at 3 armor charges, I have 45 seconds of bonus stats and weapon damage. Next, Reaper. Shortly after using your class ability, your next weapon final blow spawns an orb of power. This is pretty much a free orb of power that you can make. And then Bomber reduces grenade cooldown when I use my class ability. The last thing Bungie added with the Edge of Fate are armor set bonuses, both 2 and 4 piece bonuses. So let's talk about which ones you should look for. One of the best sets for this is the Illustrious set from Solstice. So if you farmed out this set for either the 2 or the 4 piece, it is totally worth it on any solar build pretty much. But at 2 pieces, receiving healing temporarily grants your solar weapons increased flinch resistance, handling, and reload speed. And at 4 pieces, rapid solar final blows heal you. Another set would be the Bushido set from Pinnacle Ops Activities, at least the 2 piece here. Final blows with freshly drawn or reloaded weapons heal you. And at 4 pieces, bow, shotgun, or sword final blows temporarily reduce incoming damage. Damaging targets with those weapons extends the effect. The last discipline set is decent from Vanguard Arms Rewards and also the Crucible. 2 pieces, final blows with primary ammo weapons grant your primary ammo weapons temporarily increased reload speed. And at 4 pieces, picking up an orb of power grants special ammo progress. If you're running the new Desert Perpetual raid, the Collective Psyche set is pretty good. 2 pieces, picking up an ammo brick gives you a stacking bonus to weapon swap and stow speeds until you die. And with 4 pieces, suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets, which is important. The big one is Radiant and Restoration effects applied to you have increased duration. Lastly, the 2-piece twofold crown from Trials of Osiris is pretty good, so picking up an ammo brick heals you. The 4-piece is useless in PvE. Now that we talked about the subclass, the artifact perks, your weapon options, and everything you need to know about armor, let's talk about why this build is so viable right now. Benefits of the build. Number 1, the sheer amount of damage, specifically melee damage you can do with this build. Obviously, Wormgod Caress, in my opinion, is better than Synthoceps this time around, especially with it having the seasonal armor bonus you can get on the artifact, which is nice. Getting a couple melee kills and stacking Burning Fist and Roaring Flames at the same time is already kind of diabolical, and then Burning Fist also allowing for more weapon damage as well on top of that is nice. But then also having a 1-2 punch shotgun or the new spread shot hand cannon to pair with the throwing hammer at max stacks, the amount of sheer damage you put out with just that is insane. Them reverting the change to the throwing hammer was the best thing that Bungie has done in a while. And number 2, survivability and buffs. Obviously, the faster you can take out adds, the higher your survival rate goes, but the base solar subclass, having multiple ways to heal you, the throwing hammer with cure, sunspots with restoration, I mean, heck, even if you have backup things like, you know, the healing grenade or a weapon that comes with heal clip, you have multiple ways to heal yourself with this build to where you're not going to die. And then also having the artifact perk Fever and Chill, as long as you can get rapid stasis final blows to get those stacking, you know, things of frost armor is good. Pairing that with cauterized darkness as well. So if you freeze a combatant, then hit him with the throwing hammer, the hammer itself is going to do more damage because that target is slowed and or frozen. On top of being able to use a solar weapon to get radiant as well, freeing up a fragment slot under the subclass is really nice. Obviously, this build is going to continue to flourish outside the Edge of Fate. You know, we have Ash and Iron coming up, the Renegades expansion, all that stuff. This build is going to continue to be good unless Bungie decides to drastically nerf it in some way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my updated Solar Bonk Titan build. I'm going to put the dim link for this build in the description, so if you want to copy everything that I'm using, down to the subclass, the artifact perks, the armor mods, even the drip if you'd like, that does include the ornaments and the shaders as well for each piece. That will all be included in that link. Go test this build out for yourself, and if you find that you like using something that I didn't mention on this build, definitely come back to this video and let me know in the comments. Like I said, there are a variety of things you can change with this, but as long as you have a high melee stat, being able to get over 100, it's literally mindless gameplay just running around with the throwing hammer, but it is quite entertaining in and of itself. In any event, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell next to notifications so you don't miss out on any other Destiny 2 builds I'm dropping here on the channel. If you didn't know, we live stream here on YouTube and over on Twitch and TikTok. Again, all those links will be in the description. If we're playing Destiny 2, we're mainly going to be power grinding. You know, we can do carries for the new Desert Perpetual raid. Honestly, once you understand the mechanics, it's really simple. The raid is quite fun. So if you do want to hop in, again, say something in the chat, or if you want to be proactive, join my Discord. We're starting to build up the D2 LFG community a little bit more, and I also have my own clan as well. But we also have people talking about other games in there and other topics like tech and anime as well. Lastly, if you want to help support the channel even more, you can look into becoming a member. Now, if you don't know what a membership is, it's essentially like a Twitch subscription, but it does cost less on YouTube. You're going to get exclusive emotes, monthly badges, and the big thing, early access to all of my long form videos. So if you would like more information, all you have to do is press the join button next subscribe, and that will give you a rundown with all the details you need. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been your boy. We'll catch you in the next video.